Before becoming Thor, what job did Chris Hemsworth do to support himself? And one more, what's the name of health and fitness app Chris Hemsworth co-founded? Take a shot in the comments. No Googling. I'll tell you if you're right in a bit. If you're new here, I'm Dick Carlson, and this is The Versed, Masters of the Screen. Today we'll get into the life journey of a man who turned soap operas and surfboards into a global franchise. He's not just Thor, he's a lifestyle brand. With a body built for battle scenes and a business brain to match, Chris Hemsworth is now one of the highest-paid actors alive, living in a compound that looks more like a luxury resort than a family home. He's the face of wellness, the voice of Australian pride, and the owner of a fortune that's every bit as sculpted as he is. To see how far Hemsworth has come, we need to go back to a tiny town in Australia, long before the lightning hammer and Marvel millions. Chris Hemsworth was born on the 11th of August, 1983 in Melbourne, Australia. But it wasn't all city life from the start. For part of his childhood, Chris was raised in a remote Aboriginal community called Bullman in the Northern Territory. It was an experience that would give him a deep respect for nature and a fearless spirit. He grew up as the middle brother between Luke and Liam, both of whom would later become actors themselves. At home, the Hemsworth boys were competitive, athletic, and constantly outdoors. Chris spent most of his free time surfing and playing football, soaking up the sun and chasing thrills. School came and went, and after graduating from Heathmont College, Chris found himself pulled towards something bigger, and it was acting. By 2004, he'd landed a role that would make his face familiar across Australia. Chris was cast as Kim Hyde on the long-running soap opera Home and Away. Over the next 3 years, he appeared in more than 180 episodes, quickly becoming a household name in his home country. But while Australian fame came quickly, Chris knew it was only the beginning. In 2006, he made a bold move. He left the comfort of Home and Away behind and set his sights on Hollywood, ready to take on the global stage. And what began as teenage fame in Australia was just the warm-up act. When Chris arrived in the US, things didn't fall into place right away. Behind the scenes, he was hustling hard. To pay the bills, he worked as a waiter, balancing trays by day and chasing roles by night. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept him afloat while he stayed committed to auditions and training. Between 2007 and 2010, he picked up small parts, most notably a short but memorable appearance as George Kirk in Star Trek. That exposure helped him, but real breakthrough was still hard to find. That grind finally paid off when Marvel came calling. In 2010, after a long and competitive audition process, he was cast as Thor, the Norse god of thunder. At the time, he earned just $150,000 for the role, hardly blockbuster money. But Chris saw the bigger picture. To prepare for the part, he pushed himself to the limit. He packed on over 20 pounds of muscle, trained like a machine, and transformed his body into something worthy of myth. He worked with elite trainers, fine-tuned his diet, and studied the mythology to understand the emotional layers of the character. That same year, he married Spanish actress Elsa Pataky, choosing to build a quieter, family-focused life even as his fame began to rise. Then, in 2011, Thor hit theaters, and everything changed. The film was a hit, and when the Avengers followed in 2012, it sent Chris's career into overdrive. Practically overnight, he went from newcomer to global superstar. His paycheck started climbing, and soon he was earning more than 30 million Australian dollars per film. But he didn't limit himself to just swinging the hammer. Between Marvel shoots, Chris took on projects like Rush, where he played Formula One legend James Hunt, and Snow White and the Huntsman, proving that he had range well beyond superhero roles. By 2013, Chris Hemsworth had gone from a small-town surfer with big dreams to one of the most bankable stars in Hollywood. But the best was still to come, because fame was only one part of what he planned to build. By 2014, Chris Hemsworth had conquered Hollywood. But instead of settling deeper into the celebrity lifestyle in Los Angeles, he made a surprising choice. He packed up with his wife, Elsa Pataky, and their growing family and moved back to Australia, this time to the coastal paradise of Byron Bay. There, he bought a large piece of land for about 7 million Australian dollars. He tore down the original house and spent the next few years building something completely his own. It was a minimalist yet ultra-modern mansion perched above the ocean. Complete with 6 bedrooms, a private gym, and a rooftop infinity pool, the estate eventually grew to be worth more than $16 million. He made himself a sanctuary far from the spotlight. He and Elsa weren't drawn to red carpets or constant press. They wanted nature, privacy, and space for their kids to grow up grounded. Their life together became a balance between global fame and backyard simplicity. Even with rising stardom, they stayed focused on what mattered most. They traveled more, took long road trips, and leaned into slow mornings and screen-free nights. Chris even took up new hobbies like cooking and meditation. He was rewiring, making sure the next chapter of life came with deeper purpose. Locals initially scoffed at the scale of the home, calling it Fort Hemsworth, but over time it's come to represent a balance of privacy and understated luxury. While settling into life back home, Chris kept his career in high gear. He continued his run as Thor with Avengers: Age of Ultron, while also exploring deeper roles in films like Black Hat and In the Heart of the Sea. These projects let him show more range even when they didn't break box office records. As the decade moved on, Chris began planting the seeds for something bigger than movies. Between 2017 and 2019, he took a sharp turn toward entrepreneurship. Using his fitness background and personal training routines, he launched Center, a wellness and lifestyle app built around physical strength, mental clarity, and nutrition. The app quickly took off, fueled by his global image and the authenticity of his message. He wasn't just endorsing products, he was becoming a brand himself. Major labels like Tag Heuer and Hugo Boss signed him as an ambassador, and fans began to see him not only as an actor, but as the face of balance, health, and discipline. By the end of 2019, Chris Hemsworth had become more than a leading man. He was the architect of a growing empire, one that extended far beyond the big screen. Then came 2020, a year of global shutdowns, but a breakout one for Chris on a different front. Extraction, a gritty action film produced by Hemsworth and released on Netflix, became the platform's biggest original movie ever at the time. It was a smash hit in over 90 countries and proved that Chris could carry a franchise outside of Marvel. Behind the scenes, he had already co-founded Thematic Entertainment, a production company built to develop original films and stories. Extraction wasn't just a starring role, it was a business move. Chris had started producing his own projects, building intellectual property he could help control and shape. But his biggest financial leap came in 2022 when he sold his fitness app, Center, for a staggering $267 million Australian dollars. He kept a stake in the company and stayed on board to guide its creative direction. It was a massive win that solidified him not just as an actor or athlete, but as a serious entrepreneur. Meanwhile, his real estate portfolio was making moves of its own. Chris sold his Malibu mansion in California for around $7 million, and he and his brothers offloaded a joint property for another $4.25 million. Back in Byron Bay, the Hemsworth compound had grown even more luxurious, adding custom land parcels and top-tier amenities, including that now famous rooftop pool and fully kitted-out training center. All told, his real estate holdings alone were now estimated to be worth over 25 million Australian dollars. By 2022, Chris Hemsworth had not only cemented his status as a global movie star, he'd also proven that he could build, lead, and grow a lifestyle brand with staying power. From the big screen to the wellness space and then content production, Chris had quietly turned himself into one of the most powerful names in entertainment and business. In 2022, while filming Limitless, a documentary series that pushed his body and mind to the edge, Chris Hemsworth received news that made him pause. Genetic tests revealed he carried 2 copies of the APOE4 gene, which significantly increases the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease later in life. It wasn't a diagnosis, but it was a wake-up call. Rather than ignoring it, Chris did what few would. He stepped back from acting for a while and leaned harder into his core values that lead him towards family, health, and presence. He started spending even more time with his wife, Elsa, and their children, focusing on the everyday things that really mattered. The long surf sessions, walks on the beach, mindfulness routines, and time unplugged from the Hollywood machine. That shift wasn't just personal, it was also on brand. Hemsworth had built his public identity around wellness and balance, and now life was testing whether he really meant it. He passed that test quietly, away from red carpets, by staying true to the message he'd spent years sharing. Now in 2025, Chris Hemsworth is not only thriving, he's completely in control of a fortune that reflects both his blockbuster success and his smart decisions behind the scenes. His net worth is estimated at around 130 million US dollars. Factoring in his app earnings, business equity, and real estate holdings, Australian reports estimate his total fortune closer to 225 million Australian dollars. And yet his lifestyle remains far from flashy. He still lives with his family in that jaw-dropping Byron Bay estate, complete with its rooftop spa, ocean view gym, and the kind of privacy that money can't usually buy. His car collection is modest by celebrity standards. You'll spot him in a rugged Audi Q7, a BMW X5, and occasionally a Cadillac Escalade. These vehicles are built more for family and surfboards than for show. Because Chris's biggest luxuries are time, space, and nature. Chris has always been drawn to the outdoors, and that hasn't changed. Whether it's surfing in the early morning, beekeeping with his kids, hiking along the coast, or just sitting down for dinner with the family, his life now is a blend of grounded routines and global success. He didn't just play a superhero, he became one in his own way. He's also dipped into philanthropy, supporting wildlife conservation and children's health programs across Australia. He doesn't flash it, but behind the scenes he's used his platform to give back quietly. It's that grounded character that keeps him respected, even as his stardom keeps rising. He built a life that runs on strength, purpose, and simplicity. And in the end, that may be his greatest legacy. Chris Hemsworth's journey is more than muscle and marvel. It's a story of quiet strength, smart moves, and staying grounded even at the peak of fame. What part of his path hits home for you? Or is there something about his lifestyle or choices you still wonder about? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this inspired you, stick around. The next legend story is coming soon.